Why is there such a huge gap between what we think parenting will be and what it actually is?
We're not yet there as a society where we know enough or we can be honest enough about the experience of becoming parents.
What are the jobs of mums and dads now? What's a dad now he's no longer just a provider? What's a mum now that she often is?
It's wrong. I think the lack of information and the misinformation and the way women are made to feel like failures from the off is really cruel.
Why, when we think having children will bring us closer together, does it so often push us apart? What am I supposed to teach or model for my children when I have no idea what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
And what this work does is it says, yes, pregnancy can give this kind of head start, as it were, but we're all able to care and nurture babies and children.
Why did my parents have so much conviction about these things and I have absolutely none? Well, I don't know, but there are some really intelligent people all around the world who've been thinking about this stuff, and they are going to talk to me, and we might not answer all those questions every week, but if we listen to their ideas, maybe we can get some wisdom and some insight and maybe most importantly, some perspective and find out what it takes to be a happier parent. This week, I am talking to Lucy Jones. Lucy is the author of Matrescence, on the metamorphosis of pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood. It's not an exaggeration to say that Matrescence was a life-changing book for me. So I was quite nervous, a little bit starstruck about getting to talk to Lucy, and I actually got quite emotional in this interview. But what I didn't expect was that Lucy would also get really emotional herself when she talks about her book. And I guess I should have expected it because it's a deeply personal book and Lucy's experiences are traumatic. But despite being really extreme, her experiences are not uncommon and lots of mums relate to the things that she went through. We talk about the damage that gets done when we refuse to look at the experience of mothers and only look at children. We talk about matrescence and what is changing for dads right now. And Lucy shares with us some of the things that she personally finds difficult as a mother. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. We start with Lucy reading aloud from the beginning of Matrescence.
The experience of giving birth had been bamboozling. I was attracted by the idea of a natural birth, and I believed what I'd heard and read, that if I was relaxed and used my mantras and positive affirmations, I wouldn't feel too much pain and everything would be fine. This was not the case. In the hours, weeks and months that followed, I grew more and more alienated, frustrated by the lack of language to articulate the reality of childbirth. I'd always believed in the power of words, but here they failed me. No one was talking about pain, about birth as an emotional process, about how it felt to have grown another human, to be two people at the same time, and then to be vacated, to push a person into being. I knew nothing about the emotional and psychological transition that follows birth. I had no idea that something was happening to my brain, that it was literally changing shape. I had no idea what was coming. The anxiety, the life-exploding romance, the guilt, the transcendence, the terror, the psychedelia, the loss of control, the rupture of self.
So, makes me quite emotional. And I guess I've been trying to put into words why this is the book that if I see that you're pregnant or you mentioned that you're pregnant or any of my mates are having babies, this is the one that I'm like, you've got to read Matrescence, you've got to read Matrescence. And I think it's because this book wasn't around when Eloise and I had young children, and there was a period of our lives which it was very hard for us to talk about without getting into a really big row, because we both carried a lot of anger and a lot of disappointment about the time when we had very young kids. And I honestly thought that it was a period we would never be able to discuss. And I think
this book gave me the vocabulary, it gave me the tools to look at her experience. And basically, throughout the whole of her matrescence, there was this massive rage. But and I took it to either be criticism of me, which made me really defensive, or just this anger, which I was massively uncomfortable around and made me hide. And the psychological, the biological, the neurological, the existential changes that she was going through, that I just wanted it all to be fine. And everyone was telling us it should be fine. And she felt it was supposed to be fine, and it just wasn't. And reading your book gave us the tools to kind of look through that whole experience and be like, this is what was going on.
Oh, it's really like incredibly moving to hear what you're saying, because I have so much respect for you, for the work that you're doing, and thinking about fathers and the couple, and it's quite a rare thing. And also what you're describing about you and Eloise, it's so familiar. And I definitely had that rage for a long time and really struggled to articulate it. And I think since writing this book, I have a sense that this is such a pattern, really. And as you say, it is it's a societal failing. It's that we're not yet there as a society where we know enough, or we can be honest enough about the experience of becoming parents. I think there's so many different ways that that can be harmful, and reasons for it. Like, I think that there is, like a general cultural, social kind of fear of vulnerability and dependence, and the female body, or everything that happens in childbirth, and the vulnerability of the infant. And as a society, I think we want mothers and fathers to say everything is fine, because that means that the world is fine. I think we look at parents of young children as a kind of container or a site to convince us or delude us all that the world is okay, when actually there so much progress needs to be made, and it's not an okay world. But I think and I guess another aspect which you talk so well about is how our lack of knowledge and understanding and acknowledgement of matrescence and putrescence leads to these kind of lack of connection and resentment and bitterness between couples.
The thing you said about being parents, being an example that then, if this bit is fine, then the world is okay. One of the people you quote, I think, is Melanie Klein, talking about maternal ambivalence. Can you just describe for us what maternal ambivalence means? Because I think you say in the book that some people misunderstand the word ambivalence.
Yeah, of course. So I think before I kind of looked into it, I thought maternal ambivalence meant not being sure whether you wanted to have children or not, like ambivalence around being a mother or around even having your children. But what I found was that, in my experience of early motherhood, I was really surprised by the kind of spectrum of emotions that I was feeling. Like, I'd kind of gone into motherhood with a very naive and basic kind of, I guess, societal idea of motherhood as very pastel hued and one note, and being a time of kind of utmost joy and calm and peace. And of course there was, flashes of the most ecstatic joy, but it was also for me, a time of anxiety and fear, terror, even rage. That took me to reading a really brilliant book called Torn in Two by Rojika Parker. So she is a late psychoanalytical writer, and she wrote the kind of Bible on maternal ambivalence. And what I kind of took away from that was, that maternal ambivalence means, simply that there are, different sides. You could say in a really simple way, positives and negatives. Ambi meaning both, I guess. But she writes about how, of course, all of these big emotions, how could they not be a part of a relationship? Like we expect and accept that ambivalence is part of all relationships. Indeed, Freud said that's the kind of hallmark of relationships, is that you have, in a simple way, love and hate, but meaning all sorts of feelings about the other person, which makes it kind of like a tautology almost, that we have a thing called maternal ambivalence. I think it says a lot,
Okay.
that we
Yeah,
feel like we have to,
yeah.
because it is, those feelings are kind of prohibited and not really allowed. But I found that, these words and this language, like, these terms, really kind of a relief to kind of read about, because, it made me realise that it was a normal human experience
Yes.
to not love being like hit or scratched by a 2-year-old, or not love not being able to like see my friends when I wanted, or all the things that come with raising kids.
So I think what the bit you said about Melanie Klein was saying, that basically maybe if we could understand maternal ambivalence being not being uncertainty, it's something else. It's feeling both. It's feeling all. It's feeling the extremes kind of at the same time. If we could maybe understand that in mothers, we could understand our own ambivalence towards our own parents. And also, I feel that maybe we could start to believe that humans can hold two emotions at the same time, and we'd all be much kind of psychologically richer. Whereas I saw my wife's negative emotions as a problem to be solved, and a problem that I was unable to solve. Whereas I think what your book did was, it was like, wow, what is happening? There's an angry voice of what is going on? Why has no one warned me? But also an awe and a like, wow, this is happening. And at one point you said, once you'd done some of your research into like what was actually happening in your body, you're like, oh, right. So I wasn't just being over dramatic. And I think there is a whole piece from the minute that women become pregnant throughout the birth, where you're constantly being treated as if you're being a bit over dramatic about this like huge thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you say that. It's so true. It's very interesting hearing that from like a kind of, not an outsider obviously, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating observation, and it is very true. I think that that kind of suppression of the kind of normal experience, the normal emotional experience, as something being kind of dramatic, or back in the day it would have been called hysterical. It is really, actually really kind of pernicious and corrosive. And one of the things which I think is Klein who speaks to this, or maybe it's Parker, is that you can suppress emotions. Like a mother might be able to say everything is fine, every day, and put a kind of happy face on it. But eventually the things do come out in some way. So like, for example, Parker would say that being able to just say like, yeah, this is how I feel and it's really shit right now, or, these are the actual feelings I'm having, is safer in many ways than I think what might have happened more in the older generations, who haven't been, given kind of vocabulary of therapy and psychology and so on, of it kind of being stuffed down. And then, Parker would say that eventually, like, the kind of worst case scenario is then it's visited on the child. Eventually, it kind of, it's, so I think we all stand to, I'm so glad that we live in a world where it's becoming more acceptable to just like let feelings pass through us. And
I am much to my shame, and I've not been allowed to forget this, but I think there was one point where I actually said to my wife, I still can't believe I said this, but I said, I just can't understand why you can't be a bit more like my mum about it. And she turned around to me and she was like, your mum is furious. And it took me ages to realize that, yes, my mum was actually pretty angry and had never been allowed to say it. But I feel like that kind of, is bringing us onto, your birth stories and kind of what's allowed to be said and what's expected of women. And your birth stories are really similar to mine, in that we, NCT, hypnobirthing. Like, I loved hypnobirthing because it gave me a real role. And then, like you, we had certain complications. With us, there was meconium in the water, so Eloise couldn't walk around and she had to have a heart monitor strapped to her. And the whole thing became very, very medicalised, very quickly, all completely outside of our hands. And we were so unprepared for what happened. And then afterwards, no spoiler alert for your book, but everyone turned to us and was like, no, that's a normal birth. That's what it's like. You're in there for days and you nearly die. Why do you think we've ended up with NCT and hypnobirthing as being everyone's kind of standard process in this country? How's that happened?
It's a good question, and it does seem to be very true. I mean, I didn't actually do NCT classes. I did hospital classes because we were moving house, but I got a lot of my information from their website, and then I did do some hypnobirthing classes. And with the caveat that it seems to work for quite a lot of people in some way. And I did actually find the breathing exercises. I mean, I don't think I ever did manage to go under in a hypnosis sense, but in my early labours, I did find the breathing exercises that I did. They weren't really hypnobirthing, but I can see that there is some good in being able to learn ways and skills of kind of breathing through the pain and so on. But what I found so shocking, and I don't think I really got over it, to be honest, was one, the kind of the brutality and the violence of the kind of level of the pain. It was a very long labour for me, and how, like you're saying, kind of unpredictable and frightening it felt. I really thought, one of us is going to die. And then I think that what the problem is with the focus on hypnobirthing is, or any of this kind of ideology around scare quote natural or normal birth, is that so many women then feel that they've failed, or that they could, as an individual, control the outcome of the birth, when birth is not always safe, and it's, things happen, and birth.
I also think that I had a look in our old hypnobirthing book, and right at the front, no bad birth stories. It's the fear that's going to make you seize up, and so part of it is, and I used to go around saying it to people, no bad birth stories.
Yeah.
Which then left us so unprepared for exactly what you said, the violence, the fact that the birthing room smells like a butcher's shop. It's the brutality of it that is what's natural, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what's natural. And actually, I think there must be a way of being able to say to women, or at least have it in the culture, in art or film, or the way we depict birth. Yeah, it is brutal, and you can do it. However you give birth, cesarean or vaginally, it is, but you can do it. It's, there must be a way of empowering, but as well as not just pretending. I've kind of felt duped or lied to, or this kind of I think there's so many sociocultural factors that it's fueled by our disconnection from the natural world, and our kind of modern ideas of what's natural, which are so complex.
Yeah, you have a complicated word with the word natural, I would say, right? Because you're a nature geek, as you call yourself, but
Yeah.
you say you're deeply suspicious of it in the book.
Well, I think it's like ideas of the natural are employed in often really kind of oppressive and cruel and limiting ways in like areas around pregnancy, childbirth and motherhood. Like I think, since like industrialization, like it seems that was the point where this kind of idea of the mother at home, this kind of like angel of the house who symbolized like the hearth and the kind of sacred space in direct comparison to the kind of dirty factories in the world, like that's when it seems this idea of kind of natural motherhood starts to emerge. And you've got like writers like Rousseau and kind of early childcare writing experts always talking about kind of the natural mother who is like naturally instinctively giving and self-sacrificial. And I just think, as much as I love, the natural world, I think this human idea of nature when it comes to mothers is very problematic. And in the present day, we see it, I was really taken in by this idea of being a kind of natural mother. I assumed I'd be able to breastfeed exclusively for at least 6 months, as I was told I would, have to do. I assumed I'd give birth, scare quotes, naturally. And, it was just like a rude awakening that, those ideas are bogus.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you're saying that just completely mirrors my wife's experience. That idea of being duped. I mean, she called it a conspiracy of silence. It's like, why has no one spoken to me about these things? And I think that coloured our lives for so long. Obviously there were wonderful bits and we had 3 children. We're not masochists, but I just think it's really important to focus on the bits that didn't go well. And I think one of the hardest bits to read of your book, I mean, I was reading it in bed next to my wife and she was like, can you stop reading that book, please? Because I'm like, was your journey with breastfeeding. And, no one telling you that there's a percentage of women who just can't do it, and that information not being freely shared. And I did a post on it the other day and people instantly got furious.
Oh, wow.
Why has breastfeeding become more than something that's just about health? That's what it feels like to me anyway.
Well, I think it's probably one of those cases where like, the pendulum has swung very far in a direction. I guess there has been this history of women, being sent home with formula, etc. And you got all the awful stuff about like Nestle and am I going to get you sued for saying that today?
No.
Milk formula companies.
Other people have done terrible things.
Yeah. And this kind of, I can see there's like this well-intentioned, understandable impetus to give women the choice and the chance to breastfeed their babies, which many women want to do. And we should absolutely make sure that's like a thing that people can do in public, and that needs to be supported in how we live, absolutely. But I was really shocked in my experience, which was, classic. All of the information I was given was about breastfeeding, like formula or bottle feeding was kind of dealt with quickly in antenatal classes with a kind of grimace and a cringe. And, I was told everyone, always have enough milk and you feed on demand, just feed all the time whenever the baby wants it, and your amazing body will make the milk. Our daughter was jaundiced and I was feeding like round the clock, like pretty, starting to feel a bit mad, like not having slept for kind of days, felt like weeks. And she was just dropping weight for like a good few weeks. She was not putting on weight and just couldn't really understand what was going wrong. and got into like a really dark place with it. Got like, went to breastfeeding support groups. And anyway, to cut a long story short, went through this kind of sense, that in those early weeks I'd failed her, and that I was poisoning her by giving her formula, which obviously I wasn't. But the leaflet that I was sent home with said, formula milk destroys the protective lining that the breast milk makes. And that was on like official NHS Homerton Hospital literature. And like in my kind of hypervigilant, hyper anxious, matrescent state, I just fixated on this idea that my body had failed to produce milk and I was going to destroy her. You know what it's like when you've got a newborn and like you're just like your mind is just completely focused on protecting this incredibly vulnerable, like astoundingly like holy, beautiful, sacred being. So the idea that I could destroy it was just horrible. It definitely, I think, led to me getting to a point of mental ill health, which was eventually diagnosed as postnatal depression. But anyway,
what's it like having to talk to people like me and go back and go through this stuff again and again and again? Because my wife couldn't read your book. I've read her sections, but she's like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go there. And you just said it before. I don't think I'm over it. I'm really like, I can hear it in your voice. Like, what's it like to revisit this kind of constantly?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of mixture. Like it's, I both feel like, lucky that I have, some kind of platform where I can like share my experience and talk in some ways for people who, because I just, I think it's like it's wrong. I think the lack of information and the misinformation and the way women are made to feel like failures from the off is really cruel. And also it's very paternalistic and kind of like not giving women the full information about, breastfeeding and birth and early motherhood. It just feels very patronising and kind of backwards and condescending. So, on the one hand, I feel like galvanised by how pissed off I am on a daily basis by like, my friends who have had kids who are like, maybe years into motherhood and every day are dealing with like health problems or, stress or mental health problems because as a society, we're just like treating caregivers so badly. But then on the other side, then, as you say, you heard it in my voice. Like I do find it, these are traumatic experiences for me. And to be honest with you, I think you might be the penultimate interview I'm going to do. I've been talking about the book for this subject for about 18 months now. And I think, sometimes it's easier than others, but it can be really hard to open up that stuff as well. So I need to protect myself a little bit.
Yeah.
I totally get where your wife's coming from. And I know people, I've got friends who, they just cannot even go like, it's just too painful. And that's what I've seen in like events I've done, in the Q&A session of events. Like I've never experienced this with the book I've written, but just like the emotion and the pain and I don't know, it's so moving and poignant, and just think there's so many people kind of feeling like similarly just bowled over by the emotional experience of becoming parents in our society.
Before we sort of finish around, like move on from that kind of breastfeeding and hospital topic, I thought the bit about targets was really powerful from the BFI, and even I think when you were talking about in one of the hospitals that had targets for low cesareans and what that kind of does, because you basically got health visitors who are it's their job to persuade you to do a certain thing that has nothing to do with the situation that's in front of them. And I don't want to give health visitors a hard time. I'm sure they're massively overworked, but it is the way they're trained. And I think that's a really powerful piece of information. Could you just talk about that briefly?
Yeah, that's such a good point to pick up on. for breastfeeding, baby-friendly initiative is something which I think many hospitals in the UK kind of operate under, and they have different, I think they call them like the rules. I kind of call them the 10 Commandments, the rules around feeding, basically, and when people give birth. And to receive the BFI accreditation, they have to tick all the breastfeeding hospital targets. Obviously, everyone wants hospitals to be baby friendly, but what about the mother? Like, why are they not mother friendly? Or it just felt to me like the mother's mind, mental health, body was just so absent in everything I was reading and seeing. Like, why aren't there targets for maternal mental health? Like sometimes, like I remember with our second child, again, I had feeding struggles, and they said, okay, the thing you're going to have to do is the triple feed. So feed, and it would take me like an hour, 20 minutes to like feed, top up. So make a bottle, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Top up with formula and then pump. So it would have taken me like 2.5 hours or so, and then I would have like slept for half an hour every 3 hours. And I remember just thinking, like, looking at the feeding person and being like, you're telling me to like sleep in half-hour scraps? Like, where's the tick for maternal mental health?
Yeah,
like, where's the target?
You're telling me to hurt myself.
Yeah,
it's going to hurt me. That's going to damage me.
Yeah, exactly. Then that's no good for anyone. It just felt so like the mother was seen as kind of a machine who could just be kind of extracted from and milked, with just very little understanding of the mind and mental health and how it's all linked as well. And, you know, I'm sure that part of the reason I did actually realise I had a physiological reason why I couldn't make much milk. I did breastfeed, but I formula fed as well. I mixed fed, basically, which was great. And no one tells you can do that, but you can.
Yeah, we did that. And I'm so glad my wife didn't feel the intense guilt around it. I think we got lucky there. Maybe because I was always like, well, you know, I was never breastfed. It's fine. I was, am I fine? Who knows? But at least there was one voice there being like, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Although I think sometimes men, that can make mums very angry as well. It's like, oh, just give them a bottle. And it's like, are you kidding? You know, because they've been so indoctrinated that it's, exactly like you said before, you're hurting the baby.
Yeah, I used to find it really, really difficult. Even, I used to find like a failing. But then this is where I think like the kind of the science of matrescence and putrescence is really helpful, because, you know, it does say that, you know, like now I can look back and think, like, sometimes I would be really upset when my husband gave our baby the bottle, which is like she needed it because she was jaundiced and I didn't have enough milk. But now, instead of thinking, oh, I shouldn't have been upset, or I was just being like this or that or whatever, judging myself, like I now see that my brain was changing shape, and that it was at like its most plastic at any point of adult life. You know, and that makes it more vulnerable to severe stress, you know, hypervigilant, which is what makes, you know, and you know, as you know, these brain changes happen with non-gestational, non-birthing partners too, with hands-on and affectionate care. You know, this kind of hypervigilance, which can be like a hypersensitivity as well, is, you know, brilliant, because it helps you to look after a child and keep them alive. But it also means that everything feels kind of incredibly intense for a while. And if we had that understanding, I think it might just, you know, help how people think of themselves, help relationships, help other people be able to support
relationships
them
massively. I think, as you know, we're going to talk about men for a bit, but I think we have this ideal of what we're going to be able to do after the baby comes, and no one ever really looks past the birth before you've had a birth. And then we're like, and then that's it. I'm in. You know, I'm going to be daddy. And we're completely unprepared for the hypervigilance, the extraordinary anxiety, the fact that you might be in a place where you cannot do anything right because nothing feels right to the woman, and she's not making it up because something huge is happening. We're not prepared for any of that. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to men, you know, men with pregnant wives, if you were speaking to them directly, men with young children?
It's a good question. And
Is it just a really annoying, vague question?
well, I guess I'm kind of someone who I don't really like to give advice or prescribe anything. And, I'm so aware that, people are so different and every relationship's really different. I think it would have really helped us had we known about, what it means to transition into parenthood, kind of emotionally, psychologically, what matrescence entails, what putrescence entails. I think one of the most shocking aspects was the social aspect and how our roles, we thought we were kind of equal, or I thought we could be equal caregivers, and, it just didn't really, doesn't really work out that. Society's not, as equal in parenthood as it is outside of that institution. Like, we still have so far to go in terms of giving men adequate paternity leave and parental leave, and giving, creating public spaces where both mums and dads can feel welcome, and not, if it's a dad, a kind of one-off at a baby group. So I guess I'd say that if you've got if your partner's pregnant, or you're expecting, or you're kind of in that early stage and it's kind of feeling really weird, the thing that helped me was kind of learning about what was actually happening for us. And then I also think that, at I've done so many events in the last 18 months, and very, very rarely are there men at them. And I totally get that. It's a personal book, and I'm going to get it up to a point. It is a personal book. And I think a lot of, in our culture, we see motherhood as being, a kind of niche topic or something that's just for women. But we really need to all be working together, I think, to, say that this isn't how we want it to be. We want men to have more choice to be caregivers, and not to feel I heard on the radio, a really good show yesterday, someone was saying that men are exiled from the family into work. We want men to be able to share in the toils and rewards of caregiving, and learn those skills on the job, because as you know, it's such a skilled thing, isn't it, that you get better at. And then with women, we still have these issues like the motherhood penalty, and really low paid maternity leave, and really inadequate healthcare. And I think we all need to try and work together. It can't just be the new mums who are really tired to be kind of fighting for change. We need the men to be doing just as you're doing, doing it as well. It's not just a woman's issue, it's everyone's issue.
I do see, I feel movement, right? I feel optimistic, and I feel there is people like the Dad Shift who recently put the slings on all the statues, and the Fatherhood Institute, and I can feel something's moving. You recommended I read Father Time by, can you say her name, because I feel like it's missing a vowel?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realise this, but it is Sarah Blaffer Hurdy.
Okay, yeah.
So
there's no vowel
I always,
between the H and the R, so I've been Herder.
Yeah, I always thought it was I just thought it was Hardy, but it's Hurdy.
I think she's probably the person you quote the most often. I got in my head she's a bit of a hero for you.
So she's this amazing primatologist. What she does is really kind of correct those kind of scare quotes natural notions we have as this kind of single, one mother in the home as being the kind of natural default way, when that's completely unusual compared to 95% of our evolutionary history, where we all, lived in collective caregiving networks. And I found that just incredibly, exploded this post-war nuclear family idea that I'd always felt a bit uneasy about, that actually 1, 2, it's not enough to raise a child. Of course, people like John Bowlby were saying that all along. So
we're constantly taking what we are, let's use that word again, natural, and we're layering it onto this nuclear family setup, and which makes no sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a myth. So what Hurdy does, she has grandchildren, and she sees her son-in-law kind of interacting with his child in like a very nurturing way. And she comes from a very like classic, I think she grew up in Texas, like, you know, where like fathers didn't really do very much caregiving. And so she traces, I think, through evolution, the kind of father brain. So she's responding to recent neuroscience as well, which finds that when fathers fathering, or, you know, doing what do we call it? Like Sarah Ruddock would call it, I think she calls it mother work or maternal practice. But I wonder what you feel like that, because I know that you, you know, do and have done a lot of caregiving, and, you know, often we call it.
I guess, I mean, nurturing seems to sum it up, doesn't it? When fathers are nurturing.
Yeah, exactly. So when fathers are nurturing, neuroscientists, and this won't be any surprise to you or other dads listening, I'm sure, but that the act of nurturing, the act of caring, activates these brain circuits and changes the brain. So the baby or the child is the one that's kind of eliciting the changes in the brain. All people are born with this neural circuitry. The fathers who are doing really hands-on, affectionate care, areas of the brain which were kind of more ancient, deeper, were also being activated as well as the newer areas of the brain. So her thesis is that, you know, men are natural caregivers, and they have this caregiver brain. I think she calls it kind of a hidden maternal instinct, which Darwin had even mentioned too. And I guess what she and all these brilliant neuroscientists are doing is, again, illuminating to us what's actually happening, not what society and culture is telling us, you know, which is very much still, you know, father might get 2 weeks off, if that. Father goes back to work 5 days a week, you know, most of the day. That's our kind of neoliberal 9 to 5 or more work pattern. And that's, you know, the way our structures are still set up. And, you know, what this work does is it says, you know, yes, pregnancy can give this kind of head start, as it were, but we're all able to care and nurture babies and children.
The reason it was so exciting was that she held that up against the model of Darwinism that we've all been brought up with, which is that the woman basically spends more energy on pregnancy and giving birth, and then looks after the child, whereas the man's energy is spent on competing, and we're competitive. And I feel like, you know, the feminist movement of women into the workplace wasn't motivated by men being like, come on, love, pull your weight. It was motivated by women being like, we're missing out on something, right? There is untapped potential in us. We're being denied something, fulfillment of our potential. And I feel what this book did was being like, I think when men change, it's going to be because we realize there's something that's being denied to us.
Yeah.
And that there's a person, there's things we can do and things we can become, which at the moment, under the current setup, people are like, no, you're not allowed. And I think once we get that idea into our heads, there's going to be something huge that happens.
That's such a good point. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing the kind of it coming from men, the desire and want to spend more time at home with their kids or caregiving? I
honestly don't know any man who doesn't set, you know, I've got mates who work as, you know, or journalists or in the city or whatever, who work like long hours. And I don't know anyone of them who doesn't want more time with their kids. Whether they fully appreciate what that entails in terms of the mental load and actually, you know, that not just being playtime.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not sure. But I think what is interesting about COVID is that it drew back the veil.
Definitely.
And for a lot of families, you will not find men going around saying like, being at home with kids is the easier option. Like they're
Yeah.
now super aware that that is really, really hard work. And
Yeah.
they, even if they're the ones who've gone back to being in the office, they're like, I know I've got the easy one,
Yeah.
but I don't know how we kind of keep that message for the next generation, so we don't go backwards into, oh, staying at home with kids it looks really, really lovely. I'm the one who's sacrificing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is really, yeah. There's something changed. Something's changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of opened some doors, and yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to like things like, I don't know, 4-day weeks and shorter working hours and flexible working, and I mean, the working world has got so far to come to kind of catch up with, you know, the fact that most families need to have 2 people working, and obviously many women want to work. But saying that, you know, lots of parents, you know, would like to be at home in those early years too. I think something like a care wage or a care benefit, or ways of valuing care through, you know, economic means is an important thing to do as well.
Another huge part of the book for me was you being like, oh, all these norms around what a good mother is are complete constructs. They were completely different for my mum. They would have been completely different. You know, they'd be completely different if I grew up somewhere else or was born at a different time. There's nothing kind of de facto real behind them. How do you personally sort through all the things that mums are supposed to be and then find the thing that is really, you know, Lucy Jones, the mother, and not just the things that is a response to kind of guilt and shame?
Yeah, that's such a nice question, such a good question. I mean, again, I think, you know, going back a little to language, something like, you know, the phrase intensive motherhood, you know, this is what sociologists call this kind of maternal ideal of the last kind of 20 years or so, which is kind of crescendoed probably. You know, this idea that, you know, the primary caregiver must be the mother, she must be kind of at home full time, giving lots of time, resources, kind of cognitive, emotional attunement, you know, completely different. When my granny, for example, would just like open the back door and the kids would just go out and play for the day. You know, it's sort of super different to that now. But like knowing that, you know, this is a practice which is being, well, it's found kind of across class lines, across the Western world, and it is associated with, unsurprisingly, stress and burnout and even, you know, mental health problems. Like when I start thinking, oh, I need to stay up like really late to, you know, bake a cake for something, or you know, and that's not something that I enjoy, because I want to kind of present myself and, you know, be this kind of perfect mother idea. You know, then I can say, this is intensive motherhood talking. Like, this is like a kind of mythic kind of maternal kind of notion, which actually I don't need to do it. And the other thing which has helped me kind of entangle the two
That's
is
kind of, I'm just trying to make this simple for me. You're asking the question, is this about the kids really?
Yeah.
Or is this about how I want to look?
Yeah, definitely. Or also, you know, do they really need this? Like, I mean, I think like I'm way, you know, you're way ahead of me in this journey, but my eldest is 8, so the kids are 8, 5 and 3, and I really feel that so through doing the research that I did for the book and writing the book and talking to people, that I am like unshackling myself from, you know, this like, you know, perfect maternal ideals. Like, I feel like I and I know them now, you know, I know them more and more, and it's,
You can spot
I
them.
think, you know, yeah, I know what they, you know, at the moment, what they want or need, and or
Well, I see
and I
you know
that
the
will
kids
change.
more and more. Sorry, you mean the kids? I thought you were
Yeah,
saying you can see the ideals when they're sneaking up on you, but you're like,
both.
no,
I think
right, okay.
I think both. I think that's it. I can see it a bit more for what it is, and can reject them and focus on the things that I know that like I like doing in my mothering, which is being outside with the kids or doing like sensory activities that we all enjoy, or, you know, stuff that I also enjoy at the same time. Like I'm really bad at imaginative play. I just can't do it. And I just don't try anymore. I just do something else, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's really making me think of my wife trying to do it once. It's really funny. It's just not her thing. And what about what do you find hard? Because I think it's really nice for people who are listening to this to hear someone who's studied all this stuff and thought about it in such detail, be like, and still this I really struggle with.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I think probably one of the constant things which kind of changes, and maybe it's got a little bit less acute, but it's something which really took me by surprise, was how having children would be quite kind of triggering, or bring up unresolved issues, bring up stuff, you know, how I, you know, confront me with my own like ideas about, you know, people and myself, and you know, my own, it's occasionally pushed me to the point, you know, of anger that I've never experienced with anyone else. Or, you know, I kind of thought I was a nice person, and then I think Faye Weldon said that, and then you have children, you're like, wow, you know, I can become, you know, my emotions can get the better of me. And I think that for me that is really tricky, because I'm, you know, I had quite a turbulent, in some ways, adolescence and upbringing, and I'm very keen and anxious about, you know, being a parent who does as least harm as possible and makes them feel safe. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff there for me that is complicated, and so that means that I am learning to you know, look after myself a bit more, because, like, as you know, you've got 3 kids, haven't you? I have to, you know, it's so like it's just incredibly intense, all everyone's needs, and, you know, the nervous system impact of that level of caregiving. So I think I'm learning to, you know, have a walk or have a bath, or like leave the room if I have to, and where I have to wear like earplugs and stuff sometimes if everyone's screaming.
Yeah, I think particularly the first part of what you said there is not actually in any way gendered. I don't think that applies to mothers more than fathers. If we let it, certainly for men, it brings up all the things that have gone wrong, that we don't want repeated, that, you know, and the shock at our complete lack of agency around them. You know, like, I'm going to be this kind of parent, I'm going to be this kind of parent, and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's scary, and I think it's really important to hear you say that. And then the neurological overwhelm, I feel like I've definitely experienced it, but I think there's stuff in your book which suggests that might apply more to women. And
sure.
And I found that really compelling.
Well, I reckon it also, I think there's different things. I'm sure, like, neurodivergence is one of them. And, you know, I think that, you know, in different nervous systems, different sensitivities, you know, everyone's coming to matrescence or putrescence with their own history and psychological history. And, like, you know, the idea that we could, like, enjoy every minute, as we're always told, and, you know, sail through when we're doing, like, this incredibly big, frightening job, is just insane. Like, of course it's going to be all of the things.
I just want to finish by getting some really selfish advice from you about my daughter, because, you know, one of the reasons the book is so good is because, you know, it's an amazing piece of literature. It's a killer piece of writing. But throughout the book, you keep going to get your microscope out, and you're going looking for slime molds, and you're deep into the science and deep into nature in a really kind of technical way. And at the moment, my daughter is 15. She'll be doing her GCSEs this year. We've started looking at sixth form colleges, and she's really into science. She's really into art. She's a big reader. And I feel like you're sort of asked to make this decision in this country really early on. It's kind of like, are you going to do science stuff? Is that what you're going to do? Or are you going to do the other stuff? Because you've got to decide right now, and that's going to be your life forever. I wonder what your thoughts are as someone who's like managed to merge the two really successfully.
Oh, it's such a good question, and it's so like it's such a shame that it sounds like it's still like choose one or the other. It was definitely that for me. I mean, I'm like a frustrated amateur biologist. I was kind of brought up in a much more humanities way. You know, no one did science in my family. I was very much, you know, I did all humanities for A levels and stuff. But
really, that is not how it reads.
But then I got the reason I love science is because I had like a very ultra fundamentalist kind of religious upbringing, I'd say, and science, you know, makes me feel safe. So, and I love it. You know, it's a way of thinking. So I think, I would just say if you can challenge that kind of binary in any way, and I mean any you know job, employee, or someone you want to collaborate with, or university, I think like being able to bring both minds. I mean, but maybe I'm being totally naive. Maybe it just is like siloed now and you just have to choose one or the other. Although I guess like one thing I'd say is that I think if I had studied science, it might have just killed it for me. You know, it might have made me not interested. Like I was not interested in the way it was taught at school. It just like, so maybe, you know, even if you're not studying something, you can keep it going. You know, you can always have something that you're yourself teaching yourself. Or like I never did science past GCSE, but I have my microscope and all my stuff, and I just teach myself.
Thank you so much for giving me this time, for writing that book, and for kind of always supporting me. I'm really, really grateful. And
my pleasure. I so enjoy talking to you, and I really enjoy following your work. And it's really real pleasure to chat to you today.
I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Lucy's book, Matrescence, is available everywhere. And if I haven't been clear about this, I think everyone who has kids should read it. If you want to find more stuff from Be a Happier Parent, we're on Instagram and TikTok. And also, if you want to support the podcast, you can find us on Patreon.